Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at the new comics anthology, edited by Bob Callahan. This was put out by a mainstream publisher in 1991, and this is the same Bob Callahan who was kind of in charge of those neon lit books, those great, unfortunately just a handful, actually just a couple, those great books from this time. This is a fantastic overview of some of the best comics ever. Not only does it have a lot of the current great indie cartoonists of the day, but it also has some of the old guard underground cartoonists, the ones who are still working, in this time. Well, most of them. And so just overall, it's a huge, meaty sampler of all the names you need to know if you're into comics. If you knew someone who was trying to get into good comics, this would be a great book to give them. Pretty fat, as you can see, and the cover is just a kind of a collage of various artwork that we will see inside. We have the title page, contents page. They split it up into various categories. And we have a pretty informative introduction. A lot of these panels are from the comics we're about to read, but some of them are showing some cool old stuff. Harvey Kurtzman, Tad, the old-timey cartoonist, showing the influences for many of these artists. Basil Wolverton, I love that drawing. Boris Artsy Basheff. Bernard Krigstein. Roy Crane of Wash Tubs fame. And J.R. Williams and Frank King of Gasoline Alley. So just showing, it's kind of nice seeing these little influences. See, the introduction is by Bob Callahan. I didn't mention that. So here's the first section, Ye Old Vaudeville Days. Basically just showing off the cartoonists who pretty much are just trying to get yucks. Just trying to make you laugh. We start off with Daniel Clowes, The Laughing Spitting Man. This is reprinted from 8 Ball, his one-man anthology. And this is about, this features his character Lloyd Llewellyn. I think this might have been one of the last stories Lloyd Llewellyn was in. Dan Clowes kind of put that character to bed. He is basically having an affair with this married woman. Turns out her husband was a novelty gag salesman. And she's like, you don't know what he's capable of. And so he meets the guy and he breaks down in tears. And basically, after that, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, the guy kills himself with a novelty gun, but it still kills him because the flag pierces his temple. So after that, he's cursed. And everything in his life becomes like a novelty gag. He lights a cigarette for a woman, and it explodes. He sits down, there's a whoopee cushion on his chair. When he goes to wash his face, it's that trick soap, that black soap. I love this laughing, spitting man. That's basically the one haunting him. He's like the spirit of novelty gag salesman. And at the end, Lloyd Llewellyn completely has been kind of brainwashed or possessed. And now he's out selling novelties. Great story. Really funny. J.R. Williams. This is reprinted from centrifugal bumble puppy, that Fantagraphics anthology that nobody remembers or cared about. But I like him. I really like his drawing in this. Just so simple, so funny looking. So like all J.R. Williams, this is just funny gags. This is I didn't even mention, guys, sorry, the Quaalude family. And this whole family is on drugs. And then hijinks ensue. We have one of Joe Matt's one-pagers back when he was doing this stuff. I think this is years before Peep Show. This is from Drawn and Quarterly, the first series, the Anthology series. And this is a great one about his parents. Just like even at this time, Joe Matt was just so honest. Like he knows his parents are going to read this. And he says some very unflattering things about his mom and dad. And shows them in kind of a poor light. But he does, Joe Matt doesn't care. Or he didn't care. Really good strip. Next we have a Peter Bag strip reprinted from Weirdo. Very different style for Peter Bag. A lot more like hatch work and line work. This I think is pretty early in his career. And this is called In My Room. It's just Peter Bag being Peter Bag, I imagine, at the time. Surrounded by his pop culture detritus. And just doesn't even want to leave his room. Even though his friends are having this get-together. Of course, it's some nerdy pop culture thing. They're going to watch some movies on VHS. It's just him walking around his house grousing. Probably the most autobiographical strip Peter Bag's ever done. Usually he hides his bio within a story. But this is, even though he doesn't say he's Peter Bag, I'm pretty sure this is. It's watching Scooby-Doo. And just because he finds this old magazine, some nerdy magazine that he thought was lost, that's reason enough, an excuse for him to call up and cancel and not go over to see his friends. And like a pig in slop, reading the magazine, watching an old movie, surrounded by his pop culture crap. Matt Groening, an example of one of his Life in Hell strips, with featuring Jeff and Akbar, who were very, probably the earliest openly gay representation in even pop culture. Most TV shows and movies had no gay characters at this time. This one's probably, I imagine, from the late 80s. Here's a really good Howard Cruz strip, Raisin Nancy's. This is from Snarf, the great underground comic. This one's so funny. Basically, the whole idea of this is Howard Cruz is pretending that when he was a little boy, you could order these Nancy's in the mail, like sea monkeys. And you just add water and ammonia to them, and they grow into little Nancy's. And then they just breed. There's so many of them. He shows he throws them against the wall for fun. Finally, his parents get rid of the Nancy's. They're sick of the ammonia smell in the house. And then he tells us what happened to these Nancy's. And apparently there's these Nancy farms where they become grotesque and neurotic. They're banging their heads against each other. And I guess they're bred to be almost like chinchillas. Nancy's fuzzy head. I guess it makes a perfect coat. Some good stuff. This is really nice. This is almost reason enough for me to keep this book. Jimmy Corrigan, Smartest Kid on Earth strip. This is from back when Chris Ware was just going to college, or from around that time. So this strip will probably never be reprinted because, Chris Ware is notorious for that. He just hates his earlier work. But this is great stuff. And if you like Jimmy Corrigan, that kind of stuff, it's right up your alley. And of course, Quimby the Mouse makes an appearance, a little side strip within a mid strip, I should call it. God, I would kill for reprints of these. I wish somebody would make a bootleg because they'll never come out officially. And next we have Lloyd Dangle. We All Live on a Garbage Barge. And once again, it's Lloyd Dangle being political, but more importantly, being funny about it. Not being all pedantic and annoying. But it's really fun. And this guy just wants to live life on the high seas, so he gets this job on a garbage barge. And they get rejected by every country. And then they end up meeting the Contras. And we even see Ronald Reagan and George Bush Jr. And I guess I'm not going to describe the whole plot to you. This is a big book I got to get through. This is really nice too. Apparently, this is a Mariscal strip. You might know him from Raw. And this is, I believe, he's a Spaniard. I'm probably wrong about that. Maybe he's French. I don't know. But this is newly translated. In fact, I don't know if this has ever been translated since. So there's definitely a bunch of foreign comics in here that are worth the price of admission because they translate them just for this. And could be they've never been reprinted. If you've ever read Mariscal's stuff, it's just very whimsical. Almost like there's these guys who are just basically ripoffs of Mickey Mouse and Goofy. And they just get in these very, very cutesy little adventures. And this one is just about them in different modes of transportation. And they keep transferring from a plane to a train. It's very much like a children's book. But I love his art is so fun. Just very kind of cutesy comics, but not in a bad way. Well, I guess that's a matter of opinion. But I kind of like them. But really nothing happens. Not much happens. This is a great one. Ed Pinsent, the English cartoonist. And this is Primitif. And I love this Primitif character. Primitif? I don't know. Primitif. He looks, he just looks like something from like a Babylonian scroll or something. Just really great drawn. I remember discovering this guy in those great Escape magazines. In fact, I would bet that this is from that. And this is very like mythical or mythological. It just seems like some weird old myth that got lost from like Babylon or something. Really like the density of the work. All the fun little like different kinds of graphics. It's almost like hieroglyphics popping up here and there. I like that little drawing of him. Good stuff. This next guy I've never heard of. God, I'm going to butcher this. Makit. And I believe, well, he's definitely European. I think he's French. Once again, this is another newly translated piece, so maybe this has never been, nowhere else. This is called The Twiddlers. And these Twiddlers are basically these finger characters. And then they There's these Nazi diddles. And the Nazi diddles confront our little three main characters. And they just run away. And that's pretty much how it ends. I'm sorry, it does not end. There's one more page. And they hide from the Nazi diddles. But not for long. We see them lurking behind a tree. And just a beautiful early Frank story from Jim Woodring. This was from reprinted from Buzz Comics, that great anthology. It's one of the first videos we made like 2 years ago, if you want to check it out. But just beautiful Frank stuff by Jim Woodring. Just these silent parables that could mean nothing or could mean everything. We get Manhog, his nemesis. Manhog's face just makes me laugh to see him. He was crying. Typically great Frank strip. Here's Hunt Emerson. We've been seeing a lot of him on the channel lately. English cartoonist. This one's very odd for him. First of all, using photos. But man, I like this use of photos. And then he warps it. It looks like Buster Keaton or something. And it turns into this little clam head guy. This is a very surreal one. And then he looks around, he sees these other clam head guys. When they open their mouths, we see these emerging population centers from village to giant city. And then they grow and grow. We see highways and train tracks and jet planes flying in between all these mouth cities. Then they go to war with each other and they attack each other. Look at this great lettering here. It's like Sergio Aragonés. And it looks like they all destroyed each other. And then we see that guy walk off, the Buster Keaton guy. God, that's a cool strip. It's a great surreal bit of business. Here's one of a great Rick Geary mini comic. This was also reprinted at home with Rick Geary. You can check that out on the channel too if you want. It's just a collection of all of Rick Geary's stuff, including his old minis. And Farewell to Charlie Chaplin. And this is another typical great Rick Geary story. Just nobody writes like him. And it's just about this weird story where Rick Geary, or the narrator, I should say, he moves to Switzerland. Apparently, Charlie Chaplin is buried near his village. So they steal his coffin and they hide it in the cellar of the house. Look at this great drawing. I mean, I love everything Rick Geary's ever drawn, but I do kind of miss his early style when he put in a little bit more detail. I mean, his looser style is great too. Maybe it's even better, but this looks so great to me. So I guess they're ransoming off the body of Charlie Chaplin, thinking that someone will pay for it. And that's not the case. And just they get no money. And they get in trouble. Just really nice art. This guy's really good. I can't remember if I've seen this guy before. Francis Massé. I think he's a Frenchman. And just really nice art. Once again, newly translated for this book. We see this guy from the city, and he's just talking to this scarecrow, thinking it's the farmer. And he's like, I'm going to commit suicide by jumping off the Eiffel Tower. I brought this Eiffel Tower here. But it's not, it's just a typical electrical, one of those things on the side of the road, you know, that holds the electric lines. So he's obviously crazy. And just going on and on about how he can't take it anymore, but he does love Paris, but Paris is driving him to this. And then when he gets jumps, finally falls from he's only 1 foot high or up above the ground. So he's like, it's a miracle, I'm alive. It's like, yeah, because you only fell a foot. And then when he looks over, or when he's done, we see that every electrical pylon thing, the same thing is happening. There's a guy walking away from a scarecrow. So it's like almost like this universal thing. Really nice art, really interesting, bizarre story. This is that guy Joe Schwind. He's in a bunch of undergrounds. Always does this photo collage. This is pretty useless. Usually he tries to tell a story using the fumetti format, but this one is just like, it's like an 80s fanzine, which the kind I used to make, actually, because I couldn't draw. So I would like try to make collages. But I mean, I'm sure if you were alive in the 80s looking at fanzines, every fanzine had this kind of stuff. Clipping out stuff, mushing it all together, taking little headlines from newspapers and advertisements and mushing them all together. Not very good. This is a great Bill Griffith story, Doll Boy. It's from Arcade. And it's rare to see Bill Griffith do something that's not zippy. It's a really great story about this guy with a ventriloquist dummy. And these two guys figure, we should kidnap or take that dummy. I bet that guy would pay through the nose to get it back. So they basically kidnap the dummy. They call up the ventriloquist and say something like, I don't know, we want $1,000. He's like, are you crazy? I'm broke. I'll give you $50. I can always build another dummy. And these guys are like, what a stupid idea. And they throw the dummy off this ravine. And then we realize that the dummy has agency. And he gets up and he starts walking back to town, walking back to the city. It appears to be San Francisco. And I just love these panels of him walking through the city, evading people. He's in Chinatown here. I don't know why. There's something so, something like almost like in a David Lynch film where you're like, this is a great scene. I don't know why. I can't explain it. I love the idea of this, this dummy slowly walking through San Francisco to return to the carnival and to return to his master. And that's the story. But man, Bill Griffith pulls out all the stops with the art. This is some beautifully illustrated stuff. Bill Griffith usually doesn't draw this ornately and with this much detail. This is a great one. Robert Sikoriak. This is from, Art Sikoriak is how most people know him. This was from that Bad News anthology, number 3. Once again, you can check out the video if you're curious. And this is Art Sikoriak using his skills of parody, various kinds, to talk about John Cage, the experimental composer. And actually, a lot of these are quite interesting because I guess John Cage kept a notebook of anecdotes from his life. And so some of these actually read like a good gag strip. So he's doing EC Cigar. He's doing Mutt and Jeff. He's doing Barnaby, Pogo. And all just telling different fun anecdotes from John Cage's life. I know nothing about John Cage, barely. And these are fun as hell. You don't need to. These are actually kind of interesting stories. Crazy Cat. I don't know what this is supposed to be. Father Paul, maybe Mary Worth. Blondie. This is a great Prince Valiant. Milt Gross. This is the kind of stuff, the kind of humor. We see a Peanuts parody. What did you think of today's concert? John Cage says, I enjoyed the music, but I didn't agree with the program notes about there being too much pain in the world. What? You don't think there's enough? No, I think there's just the right amount. It's almost kind of like these Zen koans or something. Here's a great Kim Deitch story. Famous frauds. And this was from Arcade as well. Arcade, one of the finest underground anthologies of all time. Maybe just anthology of all time. So there's a lot of great stuff from Arcade. I can't show them to you because they have a little too much naughtiness. So this is just a great story. I don't know if it's true. I kind of doubt it. Kim Deitch has that amazing ability to, tell a story as if it's some real tale. And it turns out he made the whole thing up. And this is about this very pious woman who lives very austerely, but she loved to dress up as this man and pretend to be this millionaire, Don Carlos Balmore, just so he could play pranks on rich people. And then once he embarrasses them, he basically they have to, there's a code of silence involved, where he's like, you better not tell anybody about me, not being this guy, being a fraud, or I'll tell everybody about how I humiliated you. So he almost has this whole legion of people that he once played tricks on and now help him do tricks on other people and are sworn to secrecy. Such a weird concept, but it's pretty funny. There's all these various gags he pulls on people. He has this whole fake life. He convinces, newspaper editors and stuff to publish these fake photos of him. And supposedly, after she died, every year there's a pilgrimage to her. There's almost like a shrine made to her. And these are all of her, basically her legion of people who were sworn to secrecy, kind of in her little club. Just a really typically great Kim Deitch story. Here we have some great Drew Friedman strips, more Laugh Makers, basically all this series of Laugh Makers. This is kind of a prequel to his Old Jewish Comedians book. But these are very sad, focusing on these old comedians and just what they're doing now. Of course, I'm sure none of them are true. Maybe one is true. These appeared in both Heavy Metal Magazine and in Weirdo. They would alternate. Shortly before his fatal stroke in 1957, Oliver Hardy would take long walks in the park dressed only in his wife's frock. Just weird little sad things like this. All these old comedians who kind of go senile or a little batty. And we get 2 more pages of this stuff. So this is like late 80s Drew Friedman. God, his style. I kind of miss the dots. Just really, he moved away from this style. You probably recognize a lot of these people. There's Jackie Coogan, Uncle Fester, and Dick York from Bewitched. And now we have Art Spiegelman's Ace Hole Midget Detective. I believe we have already seen this on this channel alone twice through, being reprinted so much. So I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty, but still, it really is a classic, a must-read comic if you're interested in the development of just comics as an art form. It's just a really great, amazing comic. I'm not going to get into it now, but for the most part. But I'm going to show it off to you. As you can see, it's just so much work is in every page. So many ideas packed into every panel. It's just a brilliant. It's like if Mad Magazine wasn't written for 12-year-olds. It's just such a good satire, modern art, many things, all these gags crammed in. This is very Bill Elder here. Some guy's crying, and it fills up the room. Yeah, Art Spiegelman got a lot of mileage out of this story. This originally appeared in Short Order Comics, which that was one of the ones we looked at. But it's been reprinted. God, I think I might have seen it twice so far since I started the channel, going through my comics. This might be the fourth time we've looked at Ace Hole. Oh, it's definitely reprinted in that comics book #1 with an X from Marvel Comics. It's really great, though. So now we have the next section, the new punk funnies. And this is kind of weird the way he divides things up, because he's got S. Clay Wilson in here and Rory Hayes. But he specifically calls it the new punk funnies, so I don't know, kind of odd. I mean, those guys were artistically and aesthetically linked to these guys. They were like the kind of the ugly underground cartoonists. But it just seems the timeline's off. God, we start with this beautiful S. Clay Wilson story. This is just gorgeous. This is from 1979. It's from Zap. Bums. And not much is going on here. Just talking about these bums hanging around, scratching themselves, farting. But this art, incredible stuff. This guy looks like he comes from a totally different comic, like a different artist drew that. So winter's coming. The lucky ones have a place to stay, but most of the bums are out in the cold. And then it just says, while outside, the bird spirit passed by. I'm sorry, guys, I forgot to mention. It's this. There's so much ink spilled on this page. I forgot that full title is Bums and Bird Spirit. It just kind of bled into the background. God, there's so much ink on these pages. It's crazy. This is some really interesting S. Clay Wilson art. Next, we have a Rory Hayes comic, Terror from the Grave. And if you're familiar with Rory Hayes, it's a very typical cute teddy bear, but it turns into an EC horror comic story. Teddy bear kills his girlfriend, or his wife, I should say, and tries to bury her. She comes back to life. It's a very silly story. I love how many panels are in this one page here. It's kind of fun. This is from Arcade as well. Mark Bayer, or Bayer? Never know how to say that. This is one of his Amy and Jordan strips. I don't know if this is just from his syndicated strips or if this was from a magazine. And very typical Mark Bayer with this weird, bizarre, primitive art style. And the plots are all, of course, very depressing. There's something about his work that is just so, like, early to mid-'80s to me. Here's Christine Critter, Dust to Dust. We just saw this actually recently in that Viper Underground comic. But if you're not familiar with her scratchboard style, here's a little taste of it. Most of her stuff doesn't have this many tiny panels. But this one's a nice little pantomime. Here's Kaz with Zombies on Broadway. This looks like really early Kaz. Actually, it is. It's from Raw from 1983. This is definitely a different Kaz. Kind of drawing a little more realistically. He hasn't mastered that total, like, animated cartoon style like Underworld has. And this is just a very also New York City, early 80s, even though it's this total fantasy, this dark fantasy milieu. Just a really just depraved story about this guy trying to score some Coca-Cola. This other guy's trying to buy some rat poison for his mob boss. Of course, the bags get switched. And once again, hijinks ensue. I love this weird little panel here where we see the rats entering into this pipe. And they run under the panels here. And then they come out at this guy's apartment. Kind of interesting. This actually was drawn in 1982, though. So this is very early Kaz. Here we have a guy, Bruce Hilvitz. Don't know much about him. Just doing a little pinup. Kind of interesting, I guess. And here's the great Julie Doucet, just doing what she does. And we just see here in the city. This is a very odd one, where Julie Doucet has the ability to fly. She's like Peter Pan, and she robs this poor old lady. She takes her pocketbook and pushes her aside, the whole time looking so cute and smiling. There's something very funny about this to me, how happy she is. She's doing this dastardly deed. And that's all this is her just flying through the city, all happy that she stole this lady's purse. Just love this art. Love Julie Doucet stuff. That was from Drawn and Quarterly, that strip. Next we have Roy Tompkins doing Buddha Popeye. And this is very 80s. Taking, some classic character, like the juxtapose artists, but making it gnarly. It's kind of great, though. I like Roy Tompkins stuff a lot. I prefer when he's just being funny, though. He did some great humor strips. There's this guy, Michael Rodin. This is from Weirdo. And this is just, that kind of fanzine, ugly art like X-Snow used to do. And, and definitely guys like Roy Tompkins. The Crazy Men Roller Coaster and Turnpike. Not much substance here. Just this guy just wanted to draw these monstrous Wolverton based people. Here we have another European, Paquito Bolino. This one's called Suicide. And this is, don't know where this is reprinted from. But I guess it's just another pinup. Not much comics going on here. But very interesting style. I would like to see some comics by this guy. Here's another European, Y5P5. That's the guy's name. And it's called The Job. And this is another one that was, I believe, translated just for this. I could be wrong about that, though. And this is very punky. Yeah, there were so many guys drawing like this back then. Here we have Mary Fleener, Parfum de la Mort. And she's doing like a little noir story here, which is kind of interesting for Mary Fleener in her little Cubist style. It's kind of fun looking at her Cubist stuff, but I've never read a Mary Fleener story that's really affected me. There's another artist I'm not familiar with, Jim Shaw, All-Consuming Guilt. And this is very tiny. He's making fun of a Jack T. Chick tract. And he pretty much nails the art. And this is basically like, as if there was a religion based on how eating is sinful, eating junk food. So it reads just like a Jack T. Chick comic, where this, very reasonable man explains to this young punk that his way of life is wrong. And of course the young punk is like, what? I never realized. Tell me more. Just like in those Jack T. Chick comics, Pretty funny stuff. Here we have Maruo Sohiro. This is such a weird comic. Bad. It appears to be Michael Jackson. And he's bashing this guy's head with a baseball bat. And then he starts spinning around. And he spins so fast, I guess his head explodes. And the whole time he's saying, I'm not the one, I'm not the one. It's so fucking weird. Here we have an early Peter Cooper strip before he developed his great stencil style. I've seen a few of these in various anthologies. Like he was even in heavy metal back in the day. But this is called Mr. Cruz. I definitely prefer his, later mature style, but it's kind of fun. Kind of fun cartooning. Oh, this one's so good. I believe this is from this is from Snake Eyes, that great anthology, Showdown at Rio Bobo by Mac White. This shit is so funny. There's this character who's a ventriloquist cowboy, and this guy picks a fight with him. And the cowboy. I'm sorry, I didn't mention that the bad guy is a Cyclops, Kid Cyclops. So the ventriloquist throws his voice and makes Kid Cyclops think that Wyatt Earp is behind him. So he's all like, drop your guns. And then he says, now pull down your britches, stick one thumb in your ear and stick the other up your butt. And now sing, I'm just an old-fashioned girl. He does. And then the cowboy just rides off with his dummy. Here's Paul Mavrides, a very weird Paul Mavrides strip. Not just the fact that it's a very weird comic strip that's very just surreal, not very narrative, but look at the style that Paul Mavrides is drawing in. Usually he is so tight, tons of lines. This amazing loose style looks really good to me. But this story is just like craziness, It doesn't really even have sequentiality. But I've never seen this one before. It features it was Dino Boy's finest hour. Dino Boy was his character that usually didn't look like this. Usually was very tightly drawn. Here's Jonathan Rosen, and this guy was he was in lots of anthologies from Fantagraphics and around this time. Not much of a story in his comics. They're kind of arty, They're kind of interesting, though. It's just like all the characters are just saying kind of interesting, weird things. But nothing really makes sense. But it looks kind of interesting. This very Hieronymus Bosch-looking character here. Oh, man, this guy was in Raw. Pascal Dory. I'm probably saying that wrong. French guy. I can't even explain this. Just, his art's insane. It looks like if you took too much speed, like a almost fatal amount, this is what you'd see. This is how the world would look to you if you lost your mind on some kind of amphetamine. It's all speed lines and just explosions and it's crazy stuff. Oh, this actually this was from Raw. We're on number 5. We have this guy, Bruno Richard, just doing a pinup basically, but looks really interesting in style, but I've never heard of him. And it's just, it's not really a comic. This is a very odd Gary Panter one. And this is from the Raw one-shot Invasion of the Elva Zombies, which I've never owned. I've always wanted to get my hands on one of those. And this is just a very kind of bizarre story. The captions, the narration is just kind of like beatnik poetry. The anesthetized alien visits men's hell. Inside it's dark and cool. The backside of the hill, however, is no laughing matter. So it doesn't really make much sense. But a really interesting art. I wouldn't even guess this was Gary Panter. It looks like someone else for some reason. So I believe this, they're shrinking it down. This is the 2-page spreads in the book. But just Gary Panter just experimenting with every kind of style. That's obviously Gary Panter there. That's kind of typical of him. We see some of his love of Kirby coming through in this one. Yeah, I gotta get that book. So now we have a little color section. Lorenzo Mattotti, the great Italian artist. And These are just basically pin-ups. Really interesting stuff. I like Matodi a lot. He worked in the fashion field. He was also in many a Raw. His color sense is outstanding. This to me looks like very chic 80s stuff. Really like looking at this stuff, but it's just some pinups, you know. Here's a Richard Cilla strip that was from Drawn and Quarterly, the original series. Very typical, creepy, funny Richard Cilla. Back when he used to do that. This one's interesting. It's, I don't even know what this is from. It's Linda Berry, just doing a little mini biography of Jimmy Rogers, the great old country, old-timey musician. It's even got this frame on it of a choo-choo train. Looks like silver. Here's some examples of Robert Williams paintings. Hot Rod Tales. I don't know if this was originally printed like this, but I think they might have messed up the color. This looks a little too dark and muddled. I've never seen this one, though. It's good stuff. I've seen these two. I love these ones. And I like how we actually get a comic strip in this one. We got definitely full-on sequentiality here. These two guys fighting each other, having a knife fight. I think this is like one of the first Robert Williams earliest I've seen, because it's very clean. So, God, great painting. Two covers by Charles Burns. And they don't tell us what they're from. Though, this is from Raw, right? I think. This looks so familiar to me. Maybe it's from Death Rattle or some underground. This one I'm not familiar with. Weird coloring for Charles Burns. It's actually got texture. You know, usually he just does the flat colors. And here's the great Jacques Lustal. And I think this is another one of those ones that was newly translated for this. So I'm not sure if this is available anywhere else in English. And this is a very typical Lustal type story. We're in the coast of Africa. There's these cafes on the beach. And it's almost like this narrator is a tourist there. I believe from the Netherlands. Just talking about all the people there. Look at this beautiful, these scenes. So nice. I really like Lustal stuff. And here's a painting by David Sandlin. And I guess it's called Babyland Babylon. Now we have Tales of Politics and Crime section. Here's Gary and Warren Police. It's kind of an interesting story. Well, I love the art. I love Warren Police's drawing, his storytelling, everything about his art. Just the way he does black and white, just the heavy inks. It's great stuff. And this seems to be, it's a little weird. It looks like this doughboy from World War I, this English doughboy, is returning, but he's returned to the 80s. And everything, of course, is different. And, of course, he doesn't like a lot of the changes. He finds a lot of the stuff ugly and frightening and weird. Man, I miss Warren Police. I haven't seen this guy draw in so long. And it looks like maybe, you know, this guy's just a ghost, obviously. That's why he's in the 1980s, because we see these crosses at the graveyard, military crosses. Here we have Joe Sacco's When Good Bombs Happen to Bad People. I don't know if I mentioned that last story. It's called London's Changed. But this one's Joe Sacco, Good Bombs to Bad People. This is from his one-man anthology, Yahoo, which was Joe Sacco's first comic. And this one isn't nearly as good as his actual comics. It's just quotes from the British bombing of Germany from 1940 to 1945 and drawings. They're all pretty damn good drawings. Pretty interesting reading these quotes, because what we see is at the beginning of every war, generals and high commanders saying things like, bombs are not to be dropped indiscriminately. The attack must be made with reasonable care to avoid undue loss of civilian life. And as the war progresses, of course, they change their tune. And pretty soon they're saying things like, there are really no civilians, and they're just the enemy. We must bomb them just like we would a munitions factory. And then they realize it becomes all about terror. The more innocents we kill, we're targeting them specifically for being civilians to, shock and awe them into defeat. Now we have the U.S. bombing of Japan, 44 to 45. Same thing. Starts off, we see a quote from 37 where they're like, we can't kill innocent life. We have to be very careful. Just a few after Pearl Harbor, they're just like, bombs away. Fuck them all. That's a pretty nice drawing. And of course, being Joe Sacco, he brings it up to the U.S. bombing of Libya in 1986. Very odd character of Ronald Reagan. And the more things change, the more things stay the same. Man, it's almost gonna be like a Wally Wood panel. Putting a lot of work into this. God, this cross-hatching is insane. I never seen this guy, Bernard Willem Holstrup, Jerusalem. And this is almost like more of an exercise in graphic design than a good comic strip. It's pleasing to the eye, all these little images, but it's just various images of, from the Israel-Palestine conflict over the decades. And, I like these little tiny panels. We see all these sheiks with the oil company logos. So it's just giving you a general view. Very general. There's Reagan again. Seems like it's all about the graphic design, though. Here's Carol Moisewicz, who does a lot of political comics. This is from Escape magazine, which I previously mentioned. This one's so amazing to me. Some excerpts from the CIA war manual for rebels in Nicaragua, the Contras. This is real. Everything taken from this is real. And basically, it's the CIA, it's like murder college and crime school. They're teaching the Contras just how to be even worse than they were. The CIA is telling them, like, oh, you got to do these horrible things if you want to win the war. A very ugly art style. It's so perfect for this, though. Here's Cliff Harper adapting Bertolt Brecht's The Black Freighter. We recently just saw Cliff Harper in those Escape English Undergrounds. He always did political stuff, almost always political stuff. Very old, like Lynd Ward, Franz Mazzarell style. The old political woodcut novels. And this is just an adaptation of The Black Freighter. I think that's from Three Penny Opera. I think his take on this is that Pirate Jenny really isn't. She's just a sad old scrub woman having this fantasy in her head that there's a ship that's going to liberate her and she's going to be able to kill all of her oppressors. But really, it's just a daydream. Here's a one-pager by Dan O'Neill about Belfast. And just a little anecdote of him traveling through Ireland. Here's a Spain Rodriguez doing a little history lesson about Tardi, who was during, I believe, the Spanish Civil War, or even before that, he was fighting. This is from Anarchy Comics. We looked at this about 6 months ago. Check out the Anarchy Comics video. It was a great underground. Edited by Jay Kinney. Just great stuff. I think every issue has a great Spain history lesson like this in it. I'll just show it off and not get into the nitty-gritty since we looked at this recently, but you can kind of imagine what it is. Just Rudy was this lefty and very heroic, fighting the fascists in Spain. Here we have Mark Zingarelli, The Cockeyed Cook Story. This is the true crime tale of this real-life killer, I believe back in the 50s or 60s. It's just kind of his life story. Kind of fun. And I like Mike Zingarelli's art. It's very simple. This was in Weirdo. Another great comic I'll never be able to show you guys. Because it's too naughty for YouTube standards. Yeah, this is really engaging, this story. I'm not like this huge true crime guy, but it's a very interesting story about this killer. It's a great panel there. I like this art. Next we have a Dennis Eichhorn autobio tale drawn by Michael Dugan. And this is from Weirdo. This is a really interesting one. I'm not a fan of the art too much. Michael Dugan definitely changed his style after this. This looks kind of un-Michael Dugan-like. Well, it kind of looks like him, but it's more crude. But this is about the time Dennis Eichhorn was sentenced to jail for a few years. I think he got out early, but still he had to live in a hardcore, prison. So just Dennis Eichhorn, great eye for detail, talking about what it's like living in prison with these like murderers. I don't know why I love this junkie in jail. He had a bad smack habit, and he had a tattoo of a devil's head on his inner left elbow. And he'd always shoot himself in the same spot, right in the center of the devil's face. And Dennis asked him, why do you always hit up in the devil's face? Because it's totally scarred over. And the guy just says, it feels right. No, I love that little anecdote from there. Talking about playing checkers with serial killers and stuff. That's crazy. I think I skipped a page here. One night he gets invited by the hardcore killer. He's like, hey, you guys they're showing a good movie in the lifers room. So apparently the lifers rooms are all the lifers hung out. And it was rare that people would be invited, so you can't turn them down. And it happens to be there watching In Cold Blood, the Truman Capote movie about the real life killers. And it's so funny, he says, watching this movie with these lifers, they're cheering on the bad guys. And that really seems to stick in Dennis's head. Good stuff. Oh man, so I don't know if this has been reprinted because this was newly translated for this book. It's a Munoz and Sampaio story of Sinner fame and Joe's Bar and all that stuff. And just, oh God, I could look at his art all day. It's a very odd little story. Just this guy's reading his paper, and I love this headline in the newspaper. Reagan has another idea. So this weird kind of greaser comes up to him, and this hoodlum, and he just starts harassing him and acting like a nut. And this guy's kind of calmly just being like, I don't know, just trying to talk him down, I guess, or relate to him so he doesn't freak out. And then finally, the guy gets a little too unruly. So the guy reading the newspaper just pulls out a knife and stabs him in the stomach, and then calmly walks onto the subway. And then he says, "Strike me down if it wasn't an incubus." An incubus. I don't get it at all. But I do like that this newspaper headline says, "Bernie Krigstein feelings," says Munoz. This does have a very, I imagine he could have just read that famous Bernie Krigstein story. Sorry, the name's escaping me now. From Impact #1. One of the greatest comics of all time. Next we have the Spaniard Marty. And this is called The Law. This is almost like a little political diatribe, but kind of masked in this weird little surreal tableau. It looks unlike Marty's stuff because there's no human faces. It seems like Marty, you think of Marty as like, oh yeah, everyone looks like a Dick Tracy character. But you can't see that here because it's just like a little parable, like the law and the state. Here's Colin Upton, the crappy Canadian cartoonist, and he's doing a little historical thing. This is from his one-man anthology, Big Thing or whatever it's called. And, I mean, this is just a weird one, where this guy, this Nazi soldier who's storming Stalingrad, he can see that one of the Russians is actually this, like, demon from hell. And the demon sees him, doesn't kill him, says, he's kind of tickled. He's like, hey, you can see me as I really am? No one else can. And he kind of tells him the whole story. How Stalin went down to hell and asked Satan to loan him demon troops to help fight the war on the Eastern Front. And they made a deal. So there's all these demons fighting for the Russians. And then when he comes back, finds his own troops, his fellow Nazis, he looks up and one of them's an angel. And at the end, this old soldier says, do you really want to know where God was at Auschwitz? He provided the guards. We see a concentration camp guard is an angel. Kind of an interesting idea, but, I wish a better cartoonist had this idea. It could be a fun, interesting story. Oh, this is so nice, guys. Once again, maybe never reprinted in English anywhere. Mark Carroll, the great film director, back when he was a cartoonist. Actually, I think he was already around making movies around this time. But, God, I love his stuff. Just so... I mean, if you've ever seen Delicatessen and City of Lost Children, you can see the similarities between his comic work and his film work. This one's a very, Orwellian, Kafka-esque, kind of weird little, I guess, not really a sci-fi story. These two police goons come to his door and they say, basically, we're to haul you away if you don't have a certificate. He's like, I don't even know what they're talking about. So he's late to work because of that. He gets fired. God, look at this art. So good. And he decides to go to the bureau. That's where you get all your, any kind of, central administration. This is the Kafkaesque part. Of course, he's sent to all these different lines. Nothing quite works. It's some kind of horrible dystopia where at the canteen people are eating rat steak. That's the meal for the day. Oh, I gotta get more Marcaro. I hope somebody collects this stuff. I pretty much only have like 1 or 2 stories in heavy metal. That's all I've seen. And so he kills this guy to get his certificate. And when the guys come knocking the next morning, he's all like, opens the door with a grin on his face, like, here you go, guys. And then the last panel, they're hauling him off, and it said, wouldn't you know it had expired? That's a little wah, wah, wah at the end. Good stuff. So here's The Murder of Hung by Dominique Grange and Jacques Tardi. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but I'm trying to be fancy. And we just looked at this recently, and I can't remember where, but it was first published in Escape magazine, the great English anthology. And yeah, I just looked at this a few weeks ago, I believe. I wish I could remember. But it's a damn good kind of noirish, even though it's modern. Just about this Vietnamese woman, with the help of her elderly neighbor, tracking down this American soldier who, did horrible things to her in Vietnam. Great story all around, great writing, beautiful Tardi art. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen non-beautiful Tardi art. It has this really great humanistic ending where the old guy basically convinces her not to get her revenge on this guy because life has taken his revenge on this guy. Or its revenge. He's just this guy with one leg, horrible drunk. And says, don't risk going to jail for this guy. Life hurt him more than you can ever do. And next we have The Forthcoming American Splendor, kind of doing autobio comics. Or just stories that are, down to earth. Here's a little Will Eisner piece. And I don't know what this is from, but I would imagine it's from that Will Eisner quarterly magazine he used to have. Just a little cute little typical Will Eisner vignette of, the Lower East Side, the 40s or something. Really well drawn, though. Looks nice. I don't know if I give you the time on that page. Man, he draws buildings so great. Oh, this is a great one. Aileen Kaminsky. And this is called Arnie's Girl. Oh, I'm sorry, Growing Up to be Arnie's Girl. Really good autobio. This is her as a little girl talking about her father, mostly. And her father was not the best dad at all. Just a terrible father. Yelling all the time. Doing inappropriate things to Aileen, like grabbing her ass when she's a teenager and stuff. A lot of people, I remember when I first saw Aileen Kaminsky Crumb, I think I was a teenager. It was in some underground. And I just thought, this is the ugliest art I've ever seen. It's disgusting. And as soon as I started reading, I was completely enthralled. She's so good at just like talking about herself and her history. So this almost gives you like a whole nice little biography of her childhood. A lot of information is packed in here. Good stuff. Here's Justin Green with Binky Brown in The Taboo Gown. And this was from Weirdo. And there's another typical tale of Catholic guilt as a little kid. young Justin Green goes to see that movie, The Robe, which is a kind of a movie about Jesus, kind of. And of course, it affects Justin Green a little too much because he was a crazy Catholic kid. Next, we have Lee Marr's Moonshine Mama. And this is from Women's Comics. And it looks like Lee Mars is just visiting her grandma who lives out in the sticks in Alabama. And her grandma was just telling her these great stories about how when she was a little girl, she learned how to make moonshine from her papa because there's no boys in the family. And her whole childhood was like getting shot at by revenuers and trying to escape them in their flatbed trucks and distributing liquor everywhere. And then because it's in the mining coal country, she gets involved with the union stuff, helping to organize against the mining companies. Really interesting life this woman has. I like this at the end. Lee Mars says goodbye. And as she's driving away, she's like, oh, poor grandma. Living in these hills her whole life. Such a drab, hard time. Such a hard life. And the grandmother thinks, oh, too bad about Joyce, my granddaughter. Such a solemn life she leads. And she's chugging her moonshine. This is by Carol Leigh, Midwestern Wedding. And this is from Weirdo as well. And on top of that, I feel like I've read this recently in some anthology that we've looked at here, but I'm not sure. And this is a pretty good, just a wacky story about Carol Leigh visiting the Midwest, her younger brother. Oh, I'm sorry. It's disguised. Cora Lloyd. Her younger brother's getting married, and the family lives in the Midwest. She's taking a plane trip out there. It seems like everyone's embarrassed of her because they know she's kind of like a crazy artist type. So these Midwestern people are very suspicious of her. She only gets along with the little boy. Everyone else is kind of a jerk to her. There's definitely some earlier Carol Leigh before she got more stylized. This is okay to me, but I definitely like her stylized later artwork more. She does really capture just the awkwardness of this kind of situation where she doesn't know quite why people are saying things to her that seem kind of shitty. And she just goes along with it. She's like, oh, whatever. You can't win. Oh, here's a classic Gilbert Hernandez story from Love and Rockets and The Whispering Tree. And this is just fucking so delightful. It's basically like an old ghost story type thing. And Guadalupe is trying to scare her younger sister, telling her about the Whispering Tree, how apparently a witch was buried under it. And you can, the witch still talks to people. So she asks a question of the tree. And, the wind blows through it. It goes, shh. She says, hear it? It said, yes. So she's totally trying to trick her little sister. And finally, the little sister runs to Ophelia, her caretaker, and she's like, man, I'm scared. And Guadalupe, she basically is all gloating about it. And, she looks to the tree because she knows it's not a real witch. And she says, I'll bet you're just a big, fat, greasy water buffalo who can't even hurt a teeny baby flea. And then the tree says, but smart-ass little girls are a different story. So even Guadalupe runs to Ophelia like a scared little kid. And then it turns out it's Beto behind the tree. It's the local drunk. Was passed out, and they woke him up. Kind of a cute little story. Next, we have Jaime Hernandez, but the script is by Gilbert. One of the rare times they collaborate in such a close fashion. This is called The Goat. Very interesting little vignette. Well, the narrator's at a bar. She sees this weird kid from school that she hasn't seen in years. Everyone called her the Goat. It almost seems like maybe she had some kind of a mental handicap. And this really tough woman comes in right when the narrator's about to buy her a drink or something. And she just pounds the shit out of her. And then she walks away. The goat just sits there looking embarrassed and finally leaves. That's my kind of bio type story. Those weird little things in life that you can't explain. Here's Carol Tyler with Labor. This is from that street music anthology Fantagraphics put out. I think we're going to be looking at that relatively soon. I got the 6 issues and I definitely want to show those off. Interesting stuff in them. So in this one, we just see this grandma taking care of her 2 granddaughters. And she's just this hard-working woman who's, working double shifts, babysitting her grandkids. And the whole time there's this monologue about doing a job well. Kind of like that old-timey idea of just it doesn't matter how little you're getting paid. You got to do your job well. And that's what this woman does, this old lady. So it's just a little slice of life, just seeing an hour in their day. Here's Mario Hernandez with Funflower Feeds. I'm just talking about when he was a little kid, sunflower seeds were almost like drugs. Everyone was addicted to chomping on them. Here's Jer Pulga, who was in lots of Fantagraphics anthologies. This is from Bad News 3. So we looked at this one. We looked at Bad News. And there's a lot of his strips just very poetic. I love his dark, moody art with all that cross-hatching. Sometimes it just becomes black. But the captions are all, reads kind of like a poem. It's a good poem. I kind of like this, even though I'm not quite sure what's going on. Here's the great Ben Catcher, and I've never read these before. I think these are from his weekly strip. And this is The Dream Book Makers. And just like many Ben Catcher comics, this just has this whole crazy idea about how there's this whole business in the city where every, I believe, week, this kind of homemade publication, I'll find the name later. People buy it, and it's just some oracle comes up with numbers that he dreams, that he does these collages and kind of pulls from the air. They publish them, and then people who are into gambling use those numbers. There's nothing illegal about it because it's just a bunch of numbers, but it's bought by people who do the numbers, play the numbers. There's also a guy who buys used hair clippings from the barbershops. I'm sorry, not used. The hair clippings for 50 cents a pound. So all these weird little businesses that might have never existed, probably never have existed. And of course, being Ben Catcher, we just see all these random characters. Here's the Oracle. That's his job, is he comes up with those numbers. Hanging out at a self-serve deli all day. Oh man, there's more ideas packed in a one page. This could be a 10-page story each one. We see the publisher of the Dream Book. and how he gets them out to the public and the publisher. And then we end with the hair clippings collector again, after he buys one of these blue dollar books. That's what they're called. That's what the little publication's called. Next we have Eddie Campbell in the Days of the Ace Rock and Roll Club. This was a series of stories. This one's called Dapper John Minds the Baby. And this is Eddie Campbell with all of his wit. And it's pretty funny. He's you can tell by the style, pretty early Eddie Campbell. Very different. Kind of more tighter. He got looser over the years. So this guy Dapper John is he has to babysit, but he wants to go to the club, and the baby's all crying. So he says, "I need a woman's touch." Hey, there's women at the club I like to go to. So he takes the baby to the Ace Rock and Roll Club, and of course hijinks ensue. He asks all these women to help him out. And then it turns out the whole time that this dumbass, put her booty on wrong. So it was like kind of hurting her pinky toe or something. After all these things they try making her poop, and just overall, just very fun. All the dialogues, well observed and pretty funny, as Eddie Campbell is known for back then. Doesn't really do this kind of stuff anymore. And I think this is just from like one of his mini comics or something. Next we have the late great Doris Seda, How My Family Encouraged Me to Become an Artist. Once again, just some autobiography about her being a little girl, her dad encouraging her to draw. And it's almost like as the years go on, she wonders, God, it's like a curse. Why did he ever teach me to draw? I'm basically delegated to this bohemian lifestyle with no money. Oh, this is nice. Juice the Swarte. The Adventures of Hergé, 50 years ago. And I don't know if this is something he read, if any of it's true. So we just see young Hergé. He's, an artist and contributor to this Catholic magazine. And they're waiting for him to fly in on the plane with some photos for the front page. They can't go to press until they have them. God, this artwork just kills me. How beautiful his art is. How just perfect it is. And obviously so perfect for doing Hergé. It looks like Tintin art. So young Hergé goes in the pilot's cabin and almost causes the plane to crash because he's all curious, pressing buttons. And but he does deliver the photos in time for the print date. Just gorgeous stuff. And I don't know if this exists anywhere in America in English. So once again, another reason to keep this. This is a great art Crumb story patent. This was from Weirdo. I'm sorry, it's from Zap Comics. I remember reading this when it came out. Just be like, yeah, this is how you do history in comics. Just this great biography of the old Delta bluesman, Charlie Patton. I could read 200 pages of this kind of shit. Especially, even if the art wasn't this gorgeous. Just, it's that full-on 80s art Crumb style. A lot more ink than he was using in the 70s and 60s. It's almost like he was hanging out with Charles Burns a lot. Started really using that pen more. Kind of typical of these old Delta bluesmen. This guy's he's kind of a scoundrel. He's just going around sponging off women, drinking a lot, drinking too much. But apparently he was one of the greats. Look at this beautiful art, man. Great panel. in his later years, he was dating this woman, and just every night it would end up like that. Complete drunk and fighting. And that's it for poor Charlie Patton. Next we have Diane Newman, What Big Girls Are Made Of. This is very atypical of anything I've ever seen by her, and that's not a good thing. Because Diane Newman does these hilarious strips, I think. And I think her strips are very funny and appealing. This is just some weird thing she did for Weirdo. It's collage art, clip art, and kind of a weird poem. Melted makeup, broken blenders, frozen pizzas, velvet paintings of the stars. Kind of a list, but almost like it's some weird poem. Very unimpressive. Barely any art from Diane Newman. See, look, this is all clip art. Once again, it's like the 80s fanzine stuff. Now we have a Harvey Pekar story illustrated by R. Crumb. Once again, there's the 80s style, as you can see by R. Crumb's heavy use of brush inks. This one's called Hypothetical Quandary. Very typical if you're familiar with Harvey Pekar's work. A whole comic just about him thinking about how he might have screwed up a business contact and might have gotten rich and famous. But then thinking about, like, if I could become a writer full time, I wouldn't be able to make these comics anymore because I wouldn't be connected to the common man anymore. I'd just be looking down from my ivory tower. This is the kind of stuff Harvey Pekar would agonize over as he's walking down the street buying some fresh bread. And that's it. We have notes on these comic artists on every one in here. Tells you a little bit about them. Not enough, though. I wish these were a little meatier. And that's it. Let me double check on that. Yeah, this was published by Collier Books. They were like a mainstream book publisher. I don't think they were a big one, but, you know. So this was a pretty weird thing at the time. In 1991, walk into a bookstore and find a book with these kind of artists. I mean, these are the artists that were just in alternative newspapers and weird little comic books that had a print run of 5,000. But this was probably available in most bookstores in America. So kind of an important anthology. I'm realizing that there's a lot of this that I don't have in other places. I mean, I wish more. But then again, who cares? It's just a great anthology. I imagine a lot of people might not have most of this stuff. If you don't have a lot of comics like I do, this is priceless. This is a great sampler of many great cartoonists. So I hope you guys enjoyed looking at this today with me, and I hope to see you next time here at the Herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.